Welcome to Unmasking Superwoman. This is an open conversation about Black women and mental health during Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a conversation that's deeply personal for me, and so I'm hopeful that over the next half hour or so, you'll find something that resonates with you, you'll leave feeling encouraged, and perhaps find something that helps you. And so I want to begin by reading a tidbit from a recent study that says the superwoman role involves perceived obligations to project strength, suppress emotions, resist feelings of vulnerability and dependence, succeed despite limited resources, and prioritize caregiving over self-care. So how have you seen that show up personally, professionally, socially, really anywhere in your life?
Yeah. Oh, I can start. Um, yeah, so I've been in like wellness work for the past 10 years. And so it all began when in 2013 I experienced grief, but I was really in that mode of superwoman at that moment, probably super girl, because I was just graduating from college. I was about 2.5 years outside of college. I was finding my career. I was working in mental and behavioral health and creating health and well-being programs and programs that were trauma informed or inviting people that had experienced varying traumas to then help cope and take care of themselves along with their families. And when I experienced my own loss and then I started experiencing my own emotional dysregulation, uh, I didn't know what tools I needed to use at that moment in time. The things that were soothing me physically or the things that were bringing me joy no longer brought me joy. And I was still in that moment realizing my own disconnection and then also trying to care and support others in their own disconnection. And so that's really where I had to start taking a moment to pause. And it wasn't really like a decisive moment to pause. It was like an abrupt start, like, Ashley, something's not right. You're not living well. Uh, and I mean, in truth and transparency, I was still at my mom's house, going to work every day, 9 to 5, working with individuals, and then coming home and sitting on the couch and like exploring bottles of wine and, like, exploring, like, "Mm, this tastes really good," and whereas I love the sensory experience of wine and I love the social experience of it, it was my way of coping, of just kind of, like, taking that glass and sitting down, and so, in that moment in time when things weren't bringing me joy, when I didn't know, I didn't feel connected to my purpose and my passion, I was definitely in this mode of doing things and not like being in it and feeling the conversations that I had or feeling the joy and creating like new ways and new experiences for others to take care of themselves and then I just was anxious like I wasn't sleeping well and so I think if I were to look back and to really be honest, that moment of me trying to overcompensate and doing and being there for others when I didn't necessarily have the capacity to be there for myself was my first really real experience with being a superwoman.
Thank you for sharing that vulnerability. Oh my goodness, because I can relate to that so much. As a therapist, of course, I support others through their healing journeys and teach all these skills on emotional regulation and connecting with themselves, but myself as well. Like when I was going through IVF, so I had lots of miscarriages. That was a whole journey within itself. And so I would get on Zoom because I do virtual therapy, and as soon as the call would end, just be done with myself and jump into bed. Maybe I had an hour in between one session and another one, and I would just sleep. And so, in looking back, I needed to take more time for myself. I needed to say, the business will be okay, but you're not okay, right? And so some people think the statement is cliche, but it's not okay. Well, it is okay to, what is it? It's okay to not be okay. There it is. It's okay to not be okay. And in that moment, during that season, there was lots of times that I was not okay. And so if I would have just taken a moment to just sit with myself, I would have recognized that I needed to take some time away instead of being everything for everybody.
Yeah. For myself, it comes from even when I was little. I was the one, the report cards would always say, oh, Angela's very talkative. She's, a little bossy, but we recognized that was actually leadership, right? It was always like, Angela would always tell people what to do, but it would always be good advice. So even having that as a child, how that kind of propelled me, it was always like, well, let's go to Angela for advice. Let's talk to her about things. Angela's the one that can figure this out. And then much like you, I had an experience where I lost my grandfather at the end of my college career, after college had been already at levels of trauma, because I was up at Virginia Tech when the shootings happened. So understanding some of that, and then how that pulled me into, after my grandfather passed, before he passed, he said, Angela, you're the glue that's gonna hold this family together. Well, at 21, 22 years old, you're thinking you're going to be the glue that's holding your family together. Became a responsibility. The cape was taken off of him, put on me, and just those things of having to push through, work through, deal with challenges. But then it always came down to, well, who's supporting me? Right. Who's taking the cape off of me for a little bit? And I recognized that I had to take the cape off my own self, recognize some things that were going on, recognize some habits that might not have been the most healthy or the most just constructive in where I was trying to go, but also giving myself the grace. So when it even comes to what being a superwoman looks like, to me now, it's giving myself the grace to make a mistake, right? To learn something new, to build myself up, to encourage other women in the community and around, and other women that are like me that fall in between the gaps sometimes, right? So we all need that level of saving, but I think the most important thing about being a superhero is recognizing when you have to pull yourself up and out.
Yeah, and so I see myself in all three of you, but I think the biggest thing, it's okay to not be okay. And I stared that face first this past year, being on TV every morning at 4:30 when you're not okay, but you're paid to be okay. That's hard, right? And so I think having this space in these conversations is really a first step in becoming okay. What is it about Black women that makes us think that we have to be okay?
Well, I had a perfect model and a strong Black woman as a mother, right? And a single parent. So one of the statements she made all the time is, you do what you gotta do. So I saw her constantly doing, because she wanted to make sure her four girls were okay. And thank God for my mom. However, I needed more opportunities to see her let herself down or say, you know what, this is too much, or you know what, not today, or you know what, I'm feeling sad. But I didn't see that. I saw my mom being extremely resilient, which is awesome. But I think little Black girls need to be able to have images or get examples of knowing that you don't have to carry it all, recognizing who your community is, and that it is safe to lean into your community when you're not okay.
Absolutely. And I think that we don't get the permission always to, throw our hair up in a messy bun sometimes and just have an off day, but it's still socially acceptable. We are taught to, put ourselves at a certain level, make sure your hair is done, make sure you're sitting properly. Like there's so many of these expectations, I think, that we get put onto ourselves, right? But then I think also society does, where maybe it's just not okay to be okay, but it's like, okay, we can have those moments, but how long are we staying in it? How long are we staying in the not okay and giving ourselves that permission?
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point, like society, right? If we look at the history of our country, if we look at the history of how Black women showed up and our roles historically in our country back, I mean, we're landing here in the city of Richmond, which, it's always really important to me to name that like 1 out of 4 Black Americans can trace their history back here. Yeah, and just thinking about the oppressive systems that were put in place, or that, human labor and the doing were the things that identified a person's well-being or the person's value. And if you just think about the Black woman, right? And their role in ensuring that not just their Black children were taken care of, or their children were taken care of, but everyone's children were taken care of. And, they're the ones that were feeding and cooking and taking care of the birthing. And, that concept of doing and being in all of the many roles. And then also, still having to take care of yourself. Many times the taking care of yourself came at the end of the day. There's no time, there's not many resources. And if you did have resources, you either had to ask for them or then exchange a part of yourself or your humanity to then receive them. And so, also, who's listening, right? Like, who did the Black woman have to go to? Who did we have to go to? And so, just thinking historically around that point, but then also over time, as we've moved away from just like that actual specific lifestyle, it still shows up. And how are we still perceived? What expectations are upon us in a workplace, in our families? and in our communities. And so I think it's so important right now as we look at the roles that Black women play, the ones in our importance and understanding our value, our inherent worth, beyond what history has shown us or the way that we've gotten into this point. But can we be willing to like reimagine and then also just also own our own way of being?
And so you touched on caregiving. So there's a podcast with Michelle Obama, our former First Lady, of course, and she says that she's had to practice saying no, strengthening the muscle of saying no, which is hard sometimes when you are a caregiver, when you are everything for everybody. How do we get comfortable but also better at saying no?
Practice, right?
Yeah.
And so just she said it in an amazing way. There is a practice of it. So even when we talk about just our nervous system and what feels right, and so it's important to understand when we haven't had permission or it didn't feel safe to set those necessary boundaries, there's going to come some activation around that word no. And so recognizing that initially it's going to feel uncomfortable, right? But the more we recognize like, okay, I said no, and whatever our brains was telling us worst case scenario would happen if I set these boundaries actually didn't happen, our bodies are able to settle and feel safer around the notion of space, the notion of boundaries. So we have to practice it, and as we practice it, our bodies are more able to embody that no and what it means for us.
And I think you practice it, like you said, you're practicing it, but it's also, like I said, giving yourself the grace. All right, what am I saying no to? I'm big on saying no, and is it just a complete sentence? Or am I maybe putting boundaries on it? That sometimes it's no for this time, yes for this time, but still with boundaries. But being really open to say no and being happy to walk away and it not having any explanation, it feeling good. Because what I think that also does for all of us is that we see somebody else saying no and it's like, nothing happened to her, right? It didn't become a big blowout. People aren't looking at her crazy. Maybe I can start saying no for myself, because I'm really big on when you say no to others, you're really just saying yes to yourself. And I know that's another cliche thing, but it's like, no, by saying yes to me, I'm giving myself all the permissions that I need to do what's best for me.
It's like the active practice of just value and understanding our inherent worth when it comes to, yes and no are both vibrations. And whereas we've either witnessed that yes leads to certain opportunities, we also experienced in our bodies what no has led to. That's why historically, and that actual like reactivation of our responses and like whatever fear mechanisms we might have that come with no. No doesn't always mean loss, right? But loss actually doesn't feel good either. And so if we can really be in that practice of understanding what yeses feel like in our body, when do we say yes? What activities are they connected to? And then which activities do no actually feels more stable in our bodies? And then how do we manage whatever loss does come? Right? Or whatever change does come. So I think just that emotional regulation around um first understanding like who we are and what we desire in our lives, but then also the response um to like whatever that response brings, can we be okay with that next step?
As she says that, everything in my body is like, yes, yes, yes,
Yeah, right, exactly.
yes.
I know it feels good to say no and then look like, and did, and said no and
Said
stuck
it.
by it. No, it feels good.
And there's some empowerment that happens as we, as we say it and we're like, it's okay. It's like, okay, my spine straightens up a little bit more. So I love that.
That's good. So I want to read you something else from this study. It says many Black women will recognize this in themselves. The relentless push to prove, perform, and persevere, even when exhausted, we're raised to be shock absorbers. So what does that mean about identity and how overperformance plays into mental health too? We can sit with it.
I think it goes, I mean, when I just hear that, I think it goes back to like the who we are. Like who are we? What's important to us? And if we even think about mental health, the truth of the matter is that everyone has some type of experience with their mental health, right? And there's many things that can cause a shift or a change in mental health, right? And we have mental health diagnoses and you have mental health experiences or challenges or issues. But if we can first and foremost live with that, like change is going to happen. And what are the ways that we can resource ourselves in those changes to help support our mental health? Like taking even the stigma away from mental health away that we have is like, this is my physical health. My physical body is here, present, and well, right? Like my emotional health. Oh my gosh, I can feel my heart. My mental health. My mind is clear, or I'm understanding what's in my mind. I know my thoughts. And if we can take that stigma away around like mental health, I think that opens us up to be more vulnerable about the roles that we play, the identities that we hold, the challenges that we face, because I think society has definitely created this space where if you can't do it all, then there's something wrong with you. Find somebody else. And we'll find someone else to do it. And or if, you are a little too vulnerable, you're crying because, there's something wrong with your child or in your home life or you've lost someone, then oh, there's this like softness there, there's this like weakness there. When the fact of the matter is like that's a strength of saying like, oh, like I feel, I'm alive, I'm present, I'm real, I'm human, I'm here. And the shunning or the shaming of just an action in which emotion is shown can easily tell us that we're not meant to be human or to be alive or to be real or to be this, that, and the third. And so I think the first step is to really understand like who do we want to be and how do we want to show up? Because a person that says like, no, I want to be vulnerable. I want to live a balanced life. I want to do the things that fulfill my purpose. I want to take care of the people around me in a well way. Um, I think we live more fulfilling lives then, and there's less mental health challenges there. But if we are then perceiving that, oh, I can't actually be vulnerable, I have to do all of these things, and I know that it causes imbalance, but I don't want to like sit with the imbalance. Like if we allow ourselves to align and accept the life that we want, I think that's our first step to living purposely versus performatively, or living presently versus like performatively. But, we live in a society, our workplaces, we have our KPIs, we have these tiers of growing up the ladder, or we have these personas of, what it looks to live well or to wealthy. And so one of my biggest practices recently is just really understand that health is wealth, right? And the peaks of career, that the peaks of relationships or changes is that the more that I prioritize my health or the understanding of identity and what I truly desire, the less I have to be focused on success or performance, and the more I can actually just be focused on the things that are right in front of me and me. So, and that's a wealth standpoint. Like if we want to define wealth, that's successful because there's this capacity to be more sustainable in the things that we're doing, not just for those like boost of moments.
Absolutely.
And I think when you were talking about that we're the shock absorbers, right? We have been that for years, right? We think about who we are, even just for our families, for our friends, that sometimes there is that, but then also this outside world of what it gives us and how we are taught to absorb it. And then what we give back should be something good. We can take all the bad stuff, but what we have to turn it into is something so good, beautiful, and amazing. And I think that that's what makes it sometimes difficult for us to truly understand who we are, right? Because we're like, okay, well, everything is coming. When do I have the time to even take a moment to say, who am I? What do I stand for? What do I believe? Do I even enjoy this, right? Do I enjoy the things that I've been saying yes to so often? Do I even enjoy it? Does it bring me happiness? Does it do something to fulfill my life? And is it also sustainable? I don't think that we're living in this era where we're being as sustainable as we need to be for ourselves, for our own mental health, for our own emotional health. We think when we, are with our clients and we're talking about the whole dimensions of their lives. And so often we say, how are you doing, girl? Oh, I'm fine. But then we take the moment to say, no, how are you really doing? How are you doing at work? How are you doing in school? How's your relationships going? How's your family? And us to really take a moment to say, okay, let me take the shock absorber off and let me expose myself. Let me expose this level of vulnerability and being comfortable with it, but more importantly, also supported. And I think that that's also a thing that we need is just more support to be able to not have to be such shock absorbers to the rest of this world and being okay to be ourselves and being super vulnerable.
And you know how special you are to me. because we met. I didn't want to go, right? Delta was putting on a mental health event. My mom was like, just come. I'm like, it's a Sunday. I want to go to sleep. I got to work tomorrow. I have to be to bed by 6 p.m. She said, just come. And so I was late. And so I walked in, and I walked into Angela's panel, and you just had the sweetest smile, and something about your spirit just invited me in. And the things that you were talking about, identity, taking care of yourself, how are you really doing? And my canned answer is, I'm good, how are you? I mean, without even a second thought, I'm good, how are you? No, how are you really doing? And a week later, we were on the phone at work, likely in the place where I wasn't really doing that great. And we just sat and talked for like an hour and a half, and we prayed. And I needed that in that moment. And so I think having people in your space that ask you, no, how are you really doing? And will listen, I think that's important.
And give space. Right? The space is so important because we can go into that autopilot. I'm okay, but okay, what if there's a sacred pause there? Then our bodies let us know how we're doing, right? Maybe we do think we're okay because we've been in autopilot for so long. And so when we're in autopilot or we are continuously being the shock absorbers, we disconnect from ourselves. And so when we're disconnected from ourselves, I might actually think I'm doing okay, but really, I'm dissociated, and my body has been screaming to me for over a year. I've been having gut issues, or I'm noticing chronic tension, or I'm noticing I'm having headaches. Our bodies let us know. But a lot of times we don't have the opportunity, or we're not giving ourselves the space to, or maybe we haven't been taught that it's okay to be still, because when we're still, that's when we're able to connect with what's really happening and what's really showing up for us. So I'm glad you found that safe space in Angela to really let down and say, you know what, maybe I'm not okay.
Yeah. And I don't think you were going to let up if
No,
I said, no,
wasn't.
I'm really good.
That's the part, and sometimes that's the important part. Many of us have beautiful communities. We got lots of girlfriends that we can talk to, but when you find that person that's trained, right? They can tell you, hey, you know what? Depression looks a little different in Black women than it looks in everybody else. It doesn't just look like we're sad, because aren't we taught to perform and have this high level? But it can look like being overwhelmed, overworking, not getting good sleep. You mentioned all the things that physically happen in our body, but when we're on autopilot and we're just going, it's like, oh no, this is how I always feel. I always have a headache when I wake up in the morning and drive to work with my hands clenched onto the steering wheel before I go in there and just pray really hard before I walk in, versus maybe I have somebody that I'm talking to, that I'm getting some of this stuff out. We store so much inside. I often say, what's living in your mind rent-free that is stopping you from really being the success that you want to be? There's those things that are just holding us back. And if we can just have the right person, the right communities, the right spaces, like you said, to give that sacred breath, that maybe I'm not okay, but I'm in a safe enough space that I cannot be okay, and I'm going to get the support I need, the love, whatever it is, to just figure out how I can start to become okay or better of myself, or whatever it is that you're trying to make that transition and that shift to be. Yeah, it's super important.
So let's talk about the resources and getting the help. A statistic shows that women are at least twice as likely to experience an episode of major depression as men, but compared to their Caucasian counterparts, African American women are only half as likely to seek help. How do we get over that? How do we get that number up?
One thing I'm just going to say is, like you said earlier, it's the stigma. If we can get rid of that stigma, I mean, being a deacon at my church, being a church girl, and a spiritual coach, it's always like, we've heard the stigma, oh, we can just pray it away, right? We can just pray it away. Baby, you're going to be all fine. We're just going to pray it, and God will come in and change it. And although that can be part of the truth, most definitely, is he not still giving you the people, the places, the opportunities to make that happen? So if we can get rid of the stigma that getting help is an issue, it's a weakness, versus it actually being something that strengthens us beyond measure and allows us to grab onto things, that's one way I think that we can start making a better attention onto what's going on with us, especially with major depressive disorder.
We need to just be real. I'm sorry. Yeah. So as sisters, as community partners, girl, I'm going to therapy. I can't meet this week for lunch because I got therapy at 3 o'clock. Yeah. And I think the more we just say what it is, the more it's like, oh, Denisha, you go to therapy? I sure do. And so then it makes it okay. Well, you know what? I've been wanting to explore therapy for so long. Who you go to? Doesn't that make sense? So I think the more we can just say what it is, like, you know what? I've been wanting to go to a therapist. Can you send me some names? I think we'll feel more safe to know that it's okay, and then that reduces the stigma.
Yeah. And empowering ourselves, right? So, like through education, and, I think that's where seeking the resources of therapy, like, what is therapy? Why would I go? Who goes? And so, yes, understanding that there are people in your community, in your circles that are seeking out therapy and might have lists of resources of good therapists. And then also being like invited to practice what you're doing within that therapy, that safe container, because I think the beautiful thing about Black women in general is that we form community really well, right? Like, we form it really well. It's ensuring that we're still in the practice of healthy relationships, even when we're within them, and like, and giving and sharing healthy resources. Because therapy could be, a person's definition of, I'm about to go to the club and
Hmm.
we want to like gotta go to brunch because that brings up joy, and that's my therapy, right? And that's real. And it's like looking at all the different ways that one might be able to connect with themselves and finding the resources that maybe aren't readily right in front of us. And so I always say that the practice of like mindful awareness, like self-knowledge is sustainability. And so the more that we take time to check in, and a check-in is like, okay, how is my mind doing right now? How is my body feeling right now? How's my breath? How's my energy? How's my sleep? Oh my goodness. Like, what's the thing that I need based on what I just checked in on myself? And then being in the small practice of like giving yourself that one thing, right? It's like as simple as how many times do we realize that we're thirsty and we don't get water, right? So, like, if I realize I'm thirsty, I'm going to go get water. And then we start in these very small steps of taking care of ourselves in these micro ways. So when these larger situations happen, we might be more prone to be like, oh, I know how to give myself what I need right now, and let me go seek it out. And so I think that check-in capacity, that capacity to like start to give and slowly pour into self is one thing. But then the mindful communication part, like how are we expressing what's happening to us? Right? If I were to think back to some of my situations or friendship circles, if we are upset, right? Upset might look like a blowout or a withdrawal. It might not look like, hey, right, can I tell you what's really going on with me? And so finding maybe that one person, even if it's just in your sister girlfriend circle or your family or your mentor, and asking if they can hold you accountable to say, "Hey, I'm really working on expressing how I'm doing right now because I really know that I have a supportive network beside me, and I just want to practice sharing even outside of a formal space." And being in practice with each other together.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine in January who pulled me aside and said, "You're different." And I'm like, "And I am. Different things are happening. I understand I'm different." And she said, "No, you're different. You're getting off work, you're angry. You're not coming out. We don't see you smile a lot anymore." And so, as hard as that is to hear, it makes you look in the mirror and say, okay, like you said, what is going on? What do I need in this moment? So if you're in your friend group and you see somebody who is struggling, how do we approach that conversation to encourage them to check in with themselves or perhaps go get help? Because that can't be always an easy thing to do, uncomfortable sometimes.
I would say first, don't put it in the group chat. Don't put it in the group chat, right? That's overwhelming. We all have these group chats that we're a part of with our girlfriends. It needs to be a one-on-one conversation. And I think that, when we have one-on-one conversations, it gives more space for vulnerability. I can let down and I can feel safe in talking with you individually, even if everybody is feeling the same way.
Yeah.
Don't do it that way, let's just say. And I think, where there is safety with your friends, people will say, you know what, I am struggling. Maybe they've been waiting on someone to notice, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what, it means so much to me that you checked in. You know what, I'm always the strong one. Whew. And so even in that check-in, it gives them an opportunity. It gives people, the individual, the opportunity to release, connect with themselves, and to share. That vulnerability piece is so important.
Yeah. There's an intimacy. I think the being in practice of, yes, vulnerability, being in practice of intimacy with like self. Like, I think that's a first practice with self, but then asking a friend, like, I really want to practice being in a more intimate relationship. And like, will you practice that with me? And that's more of those one-on-one conversations. One resource that I see around the city a lot, and I just went through, and a lot of the people that I work with, is sisterhood circles. right? And I mean, I think we naturally form circles in a lot of different ways, but formal sisterhood circles that are sacred that might follow a certain text, whether it's based in your religion, like the Bible, or um, a sacred woman book, or there's a self-help book, but giving ourselves a focal point and meeting consistently with each other and being in practice consistently of like communication, and being in a space where there's agreements that one that can be held to say like, I'm going to be here for you, I'm going to show up at this time, we're going to be here together, we're going to feed each other, like spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, with food. Yeah. And just being in that practice, it really is a practice right now. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we must be in intentional practice around our own mental health and forming bonds and connections and seeking resources, because we're holding generations of disconnection and harm. But we're also holding dinner and strength, but we're also holding the capacity to be more soft and and to have resilience look a different way. Like resilience doesn't have to look like that strong. It's just, oh my gosh, we're equipped with the ease of life. And so when a situation comes or if a decision has to be made, our resilience is our capacity to just like meet it with ease. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got, you mentioning the sisterhood groups, I've got a group of women, and it's phenomenal because what we do at the very beginning of all of our sessions, it's a beautiful check in. How are you doing? What's going well with you? What's becoming more difficult? And then, of course, at the end of it, there's always space for, hey, you want to just get pulled to the side? Let's have a little more of a conversation. Because sometimes you can just be having one of the worst days of your life, right? It's not depression, but it is the worst day. And it might, the feelings of it might carry on for a little bit. So being able to have someone, hey, let me just pull you aside. Let me help you get through this moment. And then maybe we're reaching out and we're getting you a coach or we're getting you a therapist. But it's being able to say, let me get you, let me hold you, right? And I think, like you said, as Black women, we do that. We are the comforters, right? We are the nurturers. We'll pull you in, hold you close, remind you to breathe, remind you to pray, remind you to connect where you need to connect. So I think that's super just important to pull it all back in just a little bit, but also to have that special space that feels so special, so sacred, so important. That's really making those things, making the egg just break a little bit so that new life can be born.
That's good. Intentional sisterhood. I like that. Okay, so we're going to end with one of my favorite topics, talking about joy. How do we find that? How do we become intentional about finding that? When we talked, Angela and I started thinking about the places and the spaces where I felt my happiest. You said it sounds like you're thinking back to childhood. And I've been so intentional with that. What about it when I was a kid that made me feel so happy? And how do I get back there? And so, how do we just become intentional about finding those pockets of joy?
I like to call those pockets of joy glimmers, right? These are things that help us to feel more connected to ourselves. They may be things that we let go of in our childhood, or something as simple as a cozy blanket or a warm bath. And so finding moments every single day to have those glimmers and find pockets and ways to be intentional to have those in your day. And that actually helps to regulate your nervous system. See, a lot of times our nervous system is dysregulated because we are doing all the things, then we have hard things that happen every single day. But there are beautiful moments of goodness. And you said something, Angela, of what is going well. I'm intentional to ask my clients that before sessions. They'll be like, here we go, Denisha. But it is important, right? Yeah. Because in those moments, our brain is going back to those small moments of goodness. And when we find those resources or those glimmers, our nervous system actually settles and it feels safety. And the more we do that, the more we have capacity to welcome in joy, to welcome in goodness.
Yeah, definitely the moments, right? And for me, it's being present in the moments. And so, really looking to release distractions when I am in any given situation, right? So, even if it's like a moment of being in a meeting that is requiring me to grow and make some really hard decisions, I am usually more joyful in that moment if I'm just present with what's happening. It doesn't have to be anything that's like super pleasant that's happening, but if I'm able to be present and like really focus on what is happening at that given moment, there's a joy there. And so like that's really attack the whole thing. I think look for joy in the small moments. Like look for presence in the small moments, because when we're just right there, that sense of just being able to feel like is a huge it's just a huge lift. And then just doing moments of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
So like at the end of the day or the beginning, it really depends. Like what kind of dreams are you having at night and you need to like be grateful to just like step into the day. Like are you ready at it or whatever? You might need a moment of gratitude in the moment in the morning, but then at the end, if there were some things that like had were hiccups during the day, if there were some things that were a bit challenging or stretched you a bit, like what are the things that you're grateful for? So just a simple like one to I do seven, but 1 to 7 things that say like what are you grateful for? And then understand what made you move into that space of gratitude and then do those things again. Like prioritize them. Like, is it the singing in the shower? Is it the warm water on your skin? Is it the opportunity to just like have your partner say, like, oh, I love you and like do you really take it in or have a hug or like what is it that just like gives you this moment of like presence?
Yeah. I think it's important to realize those things, like really being able to have concrete things that you can grab for sometimes that are joy. I will never forget when I was working at a nursing home back in college, there was this one woman in her late 90s, and every day she'd have a piece of chocolate. Every single day. And finally one day I just said, you must really just love chocolate, right? And she goes, well, it's my reward for making it today. She's like, no one in my family made it past 50. So every day I made it. She's like, I've got joy in today. And she'd have a piece of chocolate, right? As a little reward to herself. You know, we always talk about, you know, in coaching and therapy, what are you giving yourself as a reward? To me, joy is a reward that myself deserves. Right? And it's something where every day, in every dimension of my life, there's something that I know brings me joy. Whether it's the environment of being outside, looking at the moon, walking around barefoot, the social interactions with my friends. Like there's certain friends that you know just give you that little extra level of joy, that little extra love when you need it, the person that you can call. Being able to just identify what are those things that you can grab. Because sometimes, yes, in the moment, it's good to say, okay, if I'm having a moment, if I can just look around, what am I joyful about? What makes me happy? What do I see that just makes me feel a little bit better? Or what can I reach back into from my childhood that just says, yeah, I'm going to go do that today. I'm going to go be a part of that today. But just being able to find something, whatever it is, and not being too upset at yourself of what it might be, because it could just be being silly, singing in the car, because I can't sing worth nothing. But in the same token, does that not bring me joy to be able to sing to the top of my lungs, driving down the street with my windows down to my next destination, just to get a release, right? You know, and to be able to find that connection. And then I'm also a big fan of being able to find my joy in my faith, right? Knowing that I'm in the belief that, you know, joy is going to come in the morning. So just knowing that it's a promise that has been made, that eventually it will come, makes me that much more determined and intentional to find it every single day.